Here we'll talk about how to relate this idea of MCP to incorporating your enterprise context for your AI agents. So it's basically generalizing this idea of RAG, and then generalizing it into the idea of how do you provide the right set of tools or MCP servers for your agents to actually perform knowledge work. I'm sure you've seen all the companies on the right side. Every B2B SaaS provider is basically talking about like, how do I add agents to my product? And the big promise of AI agents is something around, lowering cost, saving time, and also increasing decision-making quality through more data. But everybody was just building RAG chatbots in the first year or so. And so really, what does it actually mean to automate knowledge work beyond RAG chatbots? For us, we're really excited about the potential of AI agents to automate unstructured data and knowledge work. 90% of enterprise data lives within documents, deeply unstructured formats like PDFs, PowerPoints, Word docs, and Excel sheets. They're basically containers for human knowledge. Humans have historically needed to read and write from these types of documents. And for the first time, AI agents can just automatically reason through a ton of unstructured vision and text tokens and perform analysis, synthesize insights, and take actions on top of this data. To make this work, though, there's really two types of agents that can reason over this type of data and perform various types of tasks for the user. There's assistant-based agents and automation-based agents. The assistive type agents are agents that are like the chat interface you're used to. They help humans get more information faster. And then the automation agents we've seen a little bit more of in the past few months, where it's more agents that can automate multi-step workflows and automate routine tasks in the background. And so instead of necessarily surfacing more data for a human to do research, it's just doing some routine operational work that otherwise requires human input to do. To do either of these, or to build either of these agents well, you really need two things. In a world where there's a lot of agents and a lot of tools, you need to, one, provide really, really good tools, and then two, have the right agent architecture. So for the purposes of this talk, it's really talking about how do you build the right toolbox and the workflows as MCP servers so that your AI agents have access to the right degree of enterprise context and can take the right level of actions. So building a document toolbox. All of you are probably familiar with the idea of RAG, right? It's basically, that was around back when ChatGPT first came out. Everyone was building these like chatbots over your PDFs. These days, the hype is all around agents. And for us, we're really trying to generalize this pattern of agents interacting with your enterprise data. And the general form factor of RAG is agents interacting with a variety of tools over your context. And so agents really need the right interfaces to access, retrieve, and also manipulate your data. And some of these tools could include vector retrieval. So that's just the part where you query a vector database through semantic search. It could include file-based stuff. So, being able to actually list the files in your directory, understand the contents of entire files instead of just chunks. And manipulation tools, where you can actually define the right set of operations to edit different types of files. Some of you might be familiar with the file system MCP server that's been pretty popular recently. That's just an example of one of these tools. And one thing that a lot of companies need to do is actually have the right pre-processing operations to make sure that you can actually define these types of tool interfaces. Some of these pre-processing operations include high-quality document parsing and extraction. So the level of visual understanding to actually lift all the text out of deeply complicated unstructured documents, PDFs, PowerPoints, Word docs, with a lot of text, tables, charts, multi-column layouts, different languages, structure it in the right way, whether it's text chunks for RAG-based use cases or retrieval, or structured outputs as metadata. And so parsing, extraction, these are all operations that you need to have on top of your documents to make sure that they're actually formatted in the right way. And if you have a large collection of documents, you also want to index and retrieve from them in different ways. And so indexing obviously could be, chunking, embedding, putting into your favorite vector database. It could also mean putting it into a structured database or a blob store or a graph database. in the end, agents have access to all of these types of file systems or storage systems through a tool interface. And your goal really is to prep the data and put it into the right storage system in the right way. So along these lines, some of the core operations could include, file lookup. So similar to like the file system MCP server, be able to actually query with the right set of parameters to understand directory trees, files, the metadata on the files, and the contents within them. There's, of course, retrieval when you do need a fuzzy find an actually relevant source of text. That's basically just, the idea of RAG, but as a tool. There's manipulation, which you'll see actually matters for certain types of files like Microsoft Excel, where the agent can actually manipulate and do form filling or actually manipulate different cells within a file, as opposed to just like reading the document itself. And of course, if you have a lot of structured data, you might want to put it in a CSV format or a database and do structured querying over it. A lot of documents, we're very excited about just like documents in general. A lot of documents can be classified as super complicated, so complex documents. Just as an example of the screenshot on the right, and I'm sure many of you could probably pull up examples from your own experience. There's a lot of stuff out there that's unstructured content that's formatted for human consumption and not really machine consumption. And if you think about just like traditional OCR or ML-based techniques, they kind of suck over the majority of these documents. And it actually requires a significant amount of human effort to try to lift the data out of these types of containers into a format that you can then operate on. So anything with a lot of tables, charts, images, layouts, headers and footers. And as mentioned here, there's a lot of traditional stuff in the space. And then there's this recent trend of people screenshotting a PDF page and feeding it into Claude, right? That's a great baseline. It's oftentimes not enough. These models are getting pretty good. Some of the long tail issues, though, the 10% of long tail issues include hallucinations, text that trails off. It's formatted in the way that you don't quite want it to be, and you don't really have any guardrails against that. And so we were probably one of the first people to realize, you can actually combine VLMs, LLMs with traditional parsing-based techniques to basically get a high level of general document accuracy or parsing accuracy over any document of any type. And so the trick is really combining LLMs, VLMs with parsing techniques and adding in a bunch of test time tokens to do validation and reasoning. We ran a benchmark on a bunch of different models. I know this graph is a little bit too dense, but basically we benchmark against a bunch of like open source proprietary solutions out there, and also tested between the models to see which ones do better. A fun fact is I think 3.5 is basically on par with 4.0 from Claude. Both of them are better than Gemini 2.5 Pro, and then both of those all three of those are better than OpenAI. But I'm sure these metrics will change as you tune the prompts and also as new models come out. A quick note on what we do. This is just, again, we care a lot about this idea of a document toolbox. So how do you actually process and structure your data in the right way to basically expose those as interfaces to your agents? Just to give you a sense of some of the operations that you might want to do on top of your documents, right? One is using AI agents to deeply detect the different elements on a page. This includes bounding boxes with confidence scores on the charts, paragraphs, and tables. Once you have that, and let's say you're building some sort of chatbot or agentic RAG pipeline, you can actually use that JSON as metadata. So whenever a user actually asks a question, you can directly have visual citations back to the source document. And so having that layer of understanding on the document in the first place is super helpful for these types of features, especially if you want to build a UX where you can like highlight the text or the images on the page. Another is multimodal like structured output extraction, getting back structured outputs from your document according to a schema. There's a really easy way to do this, which is you just define a Pydantic model and you just stuff it into the prompt. And then there's a production-ready way to do this, which can handle documents of any complexity, length, nested schemas with citations and reasoning for every key that you extract. And then the last piece is this idea of agentic retrieval, where instead of just necessarily having a bunch of different retrievers over different data sources, the ability to compose the right retrieval interface that you give as a singular tool to any agent that wants to access a source of data. And then underneath the hood, you can actually have agentic reasoning on this retrieval to make sure that the user query is routed to the right subsets of data sources, that you not only return just fixed top K of context, you can dynamically figure out if you need to return subsets of a page or the entire document. And you can compose these retrievers together in some overall graph-like structure. So you basically return a unified interface to an agent, even if you have like heterogeneous data sources underneath the hood. And then, like once you put everything together, you basically have like this toolbox that is processing, understanding, extracting over your data, and exposing the right set of tool interfaces for assistant agents for users to interact with. And this was just because this is rendered as a PDF, there's really a video there. There's supposed to be a video that shows you how you can basically plug these extraction agents in as custom workflows as MCP servers, right? And so all of these could be MCP servers you plug into your favorite AI front end of choice, whether it's Claude, Cursor, ChatGPT, Microsoft Copilot. And the advantage of this is the advantage of MCP by providing these types of like document workflows and as tools is not only that you get to integrate more sources of context, is you actually get to offload a lot of mental bandwidth required for prompting into these workflows that are standardized throughout the enterprise. So imagine you had a workflow for automated report generation over a financial report. You can codify that as an MCP tool, provide that to the client so that, or to the business user, so that they don't have to go through and copy and paste massive text files of tokens to actually achieve the outcome. They can just trigger the tool with a single line of natural language prompting. And then the other piece where we don't have a video because this is a PDF is a lot of our stuff historically, or a lot of our interest has been on document understanding, which includes PDFs, PowerPoints, Word. And then, but going along with this idea of having a toolbox, we recently launched a feature which is basically a toolbox for Microsoft Excel. And so Excel is a really hairy format, or just spreadsheets in general. Like RAG and text to CSV techniques work really terribly over these. And long story short, we built an Excel agent capable of understanding the semantic structure of every sheet, transforming it into 2D, and then providing like specialized tools so you can actually query and understand deeply complicated Excel sheets. You're just gonna have to trust me on this one. All right. This is the benchmark showing we're better than baselines. And then that's basically it. Putting it all together, we're super excited about MCP, and especially this idea of codifying document workflows and tools as MCP servers.